Well, it's great to have with me Tim Keller, who is a pastor of Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York. Tim, thank you for joining me today. It's great to have you over here because you're very well known in the States. I think your profile is rising in the UK. I've spoken to people who call you not Tim Keller, but Tim Clever, because you're seen as a bit of a brain box when it comes to things about, God and the existence of God and putting the arguments forward. Is this a sort of special ministry you'd say you've developed in recent years? Is this what you're being approached for?
I actually think because I'm an American pastor in a place like Manhattan, where I've been for 21 years, and because Manhattan is not like the rest of America, it's much more like Europe. Therefore, I think folks have found that if they bring me over, that for various reasons, I connect pretty well with the audience here, maybe a little better than other Americans, and I don't think it's necessarily I think it's because of who I've learned to speak to in Manhattan. Also, the clever, that's an interesting, I hadn't heard that before, but New Yorkers are, people who live and work in Manhattan usually are pretty smart people. They've gone to really good schools. They've worked very hard to get where they are. They tend to be experts. And I have to respond to that. I have to give arguments that work at probably a higher level. And it might bore people in other parts of the country, but in New York they want good arguments, and they're willing to sit, and they have a longer attention span for arguments because of the nature of the culture. So I don't think I'm trying to be more intellectual. I'm just trying to reach the people who I live with, and that seems to also resonate with a lot of folks, especially in London.
Take us back, Tim, to when you were growing up. Were you wrestling with the kinds of questions that you've addressed in your books as you were becoming a Christian?
Yes, I think I had I've had two places where I wrestled with these kinds of questions. The first was in college. I think, like an awful lot of folks, I was raised in a traditional Lutheran, a Lutheran church, more traditional. I went off to college and I doubted everything, and I had to work through all the same questions that
What were the big ones for you?
Actually, because of my age here, I came up during the civil rights movement. And so I found that a lot of Christians thought that Martin Luther King Jr. and folks like that were communists. A lot of Americans saw the proponents of civil rights as being communists and socialists. And most of my secular friends thought it was a wonderful movement, and so did I. So my big struggle was Christians didn't seem to be caring about justice, and the non-Christians did. And yet Christians had a lot of reason to believe in justice. That was one of my struggles. And I also struggled with things like science and history and can you trust the Bible, etc. So
what process did it take for you to come to a satisfactory place in your head where you could progress and say, well, I mean, were those questions stopping you having a relationship with Christ, or was it just that you had a relationship but you also had doubts and you had to kind of deal with those?
I would say that though before college, I think I believed Christian doctrine. I didn't have a personal relationship. There was not a true encounter. Then the intellectual doubts, in a sense, pushed me through to get that encounter. So my doubts were the best thing that ever happened to me in hindsight. I think if I'd never gone through the doubting of college, I think I would have probably never really met Christ.
That's interesting. I mean, a lot of people see doubt as the enemy of faith. I mean, do you see it that way?
No. I think doubt is, as long as you deal with it honestly, and you can, it can actually propel you toward God in a new way. There's dishonest doubt. I mean, Aldous Huxley has this place in one of his books where he admits that the reason why he didn't want to believe in God was because he wanted to have sex. And, if he believed in God, he wasn't sure he could do that. He admitted that as an undergraduate student, he said, I really didn't have honest motives for my doubts. I wanted my doubts to help me say, who knows, so I can live any way I want. So there are doubts that can destroy your relationship with God, and there's doubts that can propel you into one.
What are the main questions that you're coming across in your ministry to skeptics and unbelievers?
Well, they change a bit. For example, when I was 20 or 30 years ago, one of the biggest questions was, how can I, as a modern person, believe in miracles? I can't believe in the resurrection. I can't believe in these things because miracles don't happen. What's intriguing is younger people don't go there anymore. They're much more willing to say, it's a mysterious, weird universe out there. Who knows? So miracles isn't their problem. More of the questions that come up is, if I'm a Christian, how do I live in a pluralistic world? Will I be intolerant of other religions? Will I be intolerant of people who live different lifestyles and lives? So there's more of a question of whether it goes back to in the Roman days, in the early church, people said, can Christians be good citizens? And increasingly, I'm getting that question from people. If I was a Christian, can I be a good citizen in this pluralistic society, or will I be almost a terrorist? Because I'll just feel like everybody else is an infidel and I have to go after them.
It's an interesting area because obviously you are there kind of in the heart of Manhattan. It's a very cosmopolitan culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yet you're running this successful church. You've got lots of people coming along. I guess a lot of people probably said it couldn't be done. Yes, Bible Belt, fine. You can build a big church down in the Bible Belt. But New Yorkers, they're savvy. They're not going to buy some kind of slick marketing campaign from a mega church. What's been the secret of the success of Redeemer in terms of the way it has managed to reach these people?
Yes, I did hear that. The simple fact is that every religion except Christianity tends to be immobile. Now, what I mean by that is Hinduism began in India, and that's still where most Hindus live. Buddhism began in, really India, migrated. Probably the center is more of Japan, but it's most Buddhists are Asian. Most Muslims still live in the Middle East, by and large. But Christianity migrates. In other words, it's started in the Mediterranean. It's moved to being a European. It moved to being a North American. Now it's growing like so rapidly in Asia and Latin America. Christianity does not only fit one class. I mean, in its proper form, it has to be incarnated. It has to be communicated. It has to be connected to the baseline cultural narratives and the hopes and aspirations of any particular culture, and then it'll win a lot of people. And it was really a matter simply of finding a form that was more urbane, a form of Christianity that connected to the concerns and of the people in the city, and also answered questions of people in the city. So there's a rural form of Christianity, there's an urban form of Christianity, there's a white, there's a black, there's these various forms. They're all the same, still Apostles' Creed, still believe the same things, but the way it's couched and the way it's communicated has to be different for every culture. And once you find that way, it grows. And we were just looking for that way in New York, and we, to some degree, have found it.
Counterfeit Gods is the name of your latest book. What are the gods that are being counterfeited in our society, do you think?
Well, the idea of counterfeit gods is that every culture has its idols, and that means taking good things, making them ultimate things. Good example of this would be, in traditional cultures, there's a tendency to make the family an idol. So that's the whole idea behind honor killings. An honor killing is the family's honor is all important. It's so absolute that we'll kill somebody in the family who's not upholding it. Now, we in the West can hardly understand that. We're just shocked at honor killings, but that's because we make the individual an idol. And individual fulfillment is the most important thing. And my individual happiness is more important than keeping my promises or my submission to God. So every culture has its own idols. Also, even cities. In America, by the way, the idea is, in Boston they ask, what does he know? In New York they ask, how much does he make? And in Philadelphia they ask, who's his family? And that's a way of getting at the fact that even cities have their own idols. And yet, of course, Christianity says that whether you're from Philadelphia or from Boston, or whether you're from a traditional culture or an individualistic culture, you have to put God first, and that changes the way in which you live in your culture.
It's been fascinating talking to you, Tim. Thank you very much. Take our best back to New York, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay over here in the UK.
Thank you so much, Justin.